Good evening and welcome to Capitol This Week. A street brawl in Cincinnati last weekend went viral within hours of being posted on social media. The sight of bystanders both recording and participating in the violence hit some familiar soft spots. Things like crime, morality, and race. All converged in several awful minutes that are hard to watch. So we are going to be very careful about how we display this video to you tonight. But we do have to talk about it because it has ignited a political firestorm.
We've had way too much lawlessness on the streets of great American cities. How many of you all have wanted to go to downtown Akron or downtown Canton or downtown Columbus for a meal, but you're worried because the local authorities in these big cities have allowed lawlessness to run wild?
It's important to note that violent crime in Cincinnati and other cities around the country is down compared to the first 6 months of last year. That's according to a study by the Council on Criminal Justice. Facts may be stubborn things, but so are political narratives. Republican gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy posting this on X. Leftists like to lecture about systemic injustice while thugs turn our cities into war zones. I'm done with their excuses. As governor, I'll make sure they're behind bars, not running wild. Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno posting this. It's time for these derelicts, and there is no better person to ensure justice than AG Pam Bondi. We did edit out part of the senator's comments there. Cincinnati's police chief has had enough of politics as usual. Take a listen.
I owe it to you, as people who live and work here, to get the lawlessness under control. Okay? Now, I also want to emphasize there is no room for politics in law enforcement.
Underlying all of this political outrage is something more basic to who we are as human beings, from how we utilize the technology and information at our fingertips to why events stir our emotions. Kurt Gray is a leading expert in moral psychology and the new faculty director of The Ohio State University's Collaborative on the Science of Polarization and Misinformation, or C-SPAM. He is also the author of this fascinating book. It's called Outraged, why we fight about morality and politics and how to find common ground. Professor Gray, welcome to CTW.
Thanks for having me.
The police chief there in Cincinnati sounding a lot like the exhausted majority that you write about in your book. Why do you think this particular incident is resonating across so many levels?
Well, as a species, for millions of years, right, we've been focused mostly on one thing when it comes to our communities and our morality, and that is protecting ourselves from harm. That's how we're wired, and that's where our attention goes. And so when there's a big brawl in our city, where we call home, that captivates our attention, and it makes us condemn those acts. It makes us want to blame someone.
Professor, I do want to talk more about that because we have two narratives that you described in your book that are sort of working in tandem here. One is that protection narrative that you discuss, and I think it's encapsulated by something Governor DeWine had to say. Take a listen.
Well, the video that I think we all have now seen is shocking. It's horrible. It is people's worst nightmare of what could happen to them, and we have to change that.
That does speak to that perception of harm that you have been talking about. But there's also another narrative that politicians are using, some of which we heard from the vice president and a little from Senator Moreno and Vivek Ramaswamy, and that is the destruction narrative. Why does that come into play here?
Great question. And so when we see bad actors, when we see chaos, the narrative that we frequently apply is the destruction narrative, right? We think, here's a group of people who are out to destroy America, out to destroy our communities and my family. And that's why they're posting the video. That's why they're fighting. At the same time, psychological research suggests that's not why we act the way we do. That's not why we are afraid to get in the fray. That's not why We're afraid to stand up. The reason that we do what we do most of the time is described by what I call a protection narrative, right? When we cast our votes, when we give money to political campaigns, it's not because we're trying to destroy the world like some supervillain. It's because we're trying to protect ourselves and our communities, right? That's what drives the behavior of 99% of the population, even if there's a few people, right, who might be motivated to fight when they're drunk.
So much of this, as you have described, is primal, isn't it? The fact that we like to think of ourselves, as you mentioned earlier, as predators, but in reality, we're prey, and we're sort of responding that way with our politics.
Exactly right. And this is an assumption that we make that underlies a lot of these assumptions of destruction, right? We think of people, especially people who disagree with us when it comes to politics, as predators, right? As stalking our neighborhoods, trying to destroy us and our way of life, right? That's what's painted the picture by politicians. But almost no one's that way because we evolved as a species more as hunted than hunter, right? Back in the midst of time, we were not attacking saber-toothed cats, they were attacking us, right? We were worried about getting eaten. We were worried about getting murdered. And so it's that kind of concern for self-preservation and protecting our family that underlies a lot of our decisions. Most of us are not predators, right? We feel more like prey.
You also discuss how we perceive one another in terms of our political differences, and that most of the time we are looking at a very extreme view of people we don't agree with, when the reality is they're closer in agreement to what we may think. For example, you talk about the idea that many Republicans believe that Democrats are in favor of harming children, for summing up for you there, when in actuality the percentage of people that are doing that is far less, or have that sort of belief is far less. And on the other side, there are some other misconceptions there. Can you talk about that for a minute?
You bet. When we think of folks on the other side of the aisle, if you're left, those on the right, if you're right, those on the left, you think that they are either stupid, right? Or you think that they're evil, right? How else can they have different moral views? But the truth of the matter is that we don't actually disagree about morality and politics all that much. Certainly about hot button issues, but most people agree on most of the things when it comes to abortion, on immigration, right? We want our country to have good immigrants, right? And to have a strong economy. We especially agree when it comes to drunken violence in our cities, right? No one thinks that that is a good idea. And so, in fact, this is a great example of where moral agreement comes from, right? We're all concerned about protecting ourselves from harm. And yet there are some folks, right, who are trying to get donations or votes that try to use those to divide us. But most of us, especially in this case, are in full agreement. Let's not have this.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.